All right, guys, we've got a very special guest for you today. This is Tom Gire, who is a film composer and the co-founder of Brand X Music. And if you guys have been in sync licensing for at all any period of time, you might know Brand X Music is a pretty heavy-duty player in our industry. Their credits are ridiculously long. We're actually going to name them here in just a minute. But we got connected actually as a result of a recent track review I was doing right here on the channel for that Swagger Rock track review, and that turned out to be a track that Tom released under Brand X. And so that's how we got connected. So we're really grateful to have him here. And we're going to dive into Brand X and his history, and also how potentially you watching this video might be able to partner with somebody like Tom. So let's just dive right into it. Tom, back in 2001, created Brand X with your fellow composer Tom Sponsler, and you guys actually worked with Hans Zimmer himself on quite a few projects. You guys worked on Pirates of the Caribbean franchises, Rango, Despicable Me, and a few of the Transformers films. You guys have also composed trailer music for the first Matrix, not the follow-up, not the new sequels, but the actual OG, the first Matrix from '99. They have done all the Harry Potter films. They have also done some work for Star Wars, Rise of the Skywalker. And of course, they've done ad campaigns. Some of their clients are Boeing, the US Navy, Scion, Gatorade, and Wendy's. And there are literally crazy amounts more of credits for films and shows that you can actually check out below if you want to. I'll link to their credits so you guys can see. It's kind of ridiculous. It's too many to name here on a channel. So, Tom, man, thank you so much for being here. Obviously, congrats to you or all the success you guys have had with Brand X. Why don't you walk us back, go all the way back to 2001. What were you doing? Why did you start Brand X? What brought you into this crazy world of sync?
Well, glad to be here. Thanks, Jesse, having me. It I think I started out, I don't know, you're a musician, right? Like you crawled onto a piano stool or picked up a guitar or at some, so that was my story as well. A piano player from a little kid and loved music and was going to be a performer. You know, the goal was move to LA and be a studio musician and be Chick Corea when I grow up. So I came down here. I'm originally from Seattle. We were talking about trees before we went. So I'm a rain loving tree guy as well. That just was misplaced in California, I suppose. Um, but came down here to go to school and was studying music performance. I was always into jazz and pop, and kind of making up was in my head versus playing Mozart and piano competitions and that kind of stuff. So, you know, by the time you get to 18 years old, I'd done a lot of playing, I'd done a lot of studying, and now I wanted to kind of gig. And so I came down here and started to work, and was trying to figure out, you know, how do you become a session musician? How does this happen? And real quickly, you figure out that in LA, there's maybe 200 total session musicians, and everybody else wants to be one of those 200. And I got lucky enough to be invited to a recording date for a cartoon show called the Animaniacs. I think they rebooted that, but this was the original run. And Joe Picaro was playing mallets on the date, and so his kids were in Toto, but he's kind of like the patron of the whole family, and so he is a top call teacher and percussion session guy. Anyway, long story, there's a stack of charts 3 inches deep. It's covered in notes like, you know, fly crap, and they're not even looking at it. Like they're sipping coffee. Hey, Joe, how's the kid? Oh, I'm good. How's the wife? Oh, fine. And I'm sweating because I'm contemplating having to sight read this stuff. And, you know, I quickly found out that they sight read it once, they rehearse it a second time, and they record it the third time, and usually that's the keeper. And so the level of sight reading that was required to do this job was something I simply never possessed, right? I can read charts, I can read rhythms, I can read music, but this kind of, I can take Stravinsky and pretty much have it on my third time through, was just mind blowing to me. So I distinctly remember leaving that session going, okay, now what? And so worked for a while as a musical director for cruise companies, and, you know, kind of pursued the musician thing and wound up back in LA, um, kind of realizing that as a musician, my analogy is that it's a giant sausage machine. And when you crank one end, sausage comes out the other end, right? And as a musician, you hustle the gig, you settle on the rate, you put the crap in the car, you drive to the gig, you put on the suit, you play the music, you go home, and the sausage comes, hopefully, right? The band leader has the checkbook. Uh, and you begin to realize, man, how long can I do this? Like, I can feed myself now, but I want to have a family and I want to do these things. And, the everything else costs 6 times as much as it used to. I went out for Mexican food the other day and I paid $17 for a wet red burrito. 17 bucks. But my friends still go and play bar gigs and it's still 125 bucks for the night. So, the economy that has followed sort of live musician thing hasn't kept up with the rate of any kind of economy that actually exists. So that was kind of a long way to say I really was interested in something that turned the crank for me. And I was really, really, really blessed, lucky to meet two people. One was John Sponsor, my business partner, and then we had a guy that was working for a trailer house that was cutting trailers. And this was back in a period of time where kind of library music was muzak. Everybody thought library music was what you heard in elevators. And if you had any kind of budget at all for your show, you would never, ever use library music because it just meant you were garbage. And at the same time, the guy we were cutting trailers with was talking about this library that he was loving. And we're like, library music, ew. And he goes, no, 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 this is different. This is this thing called immediate music. And these guys called Jeff and Yo, and they do something different. And I'm using the same 2 or 3 tracks from these guys in like every TV spot I cut. Now, this guy was cutting a lot of Warner Brothers action-y kind of movies, so he's gravitating towards the same kind of cues. And he's like, so it seems to me they write it once and I pay them over and over and over and over. And I think that would be a good business model. And I'm going, yeah, but how do you make any money up front? Like, how do you keep your lights on while you wait for that over and over and over thing to start? And he said to me, look, if you do it long enough and you play it right, you will not worry about creative fee. Like as a musician, you go, yeah, how long's the gig and how much does it pay? Those are the two, as a composer, what's the time frame and what's the budget? You just want to know this. And the concept of I would do work and I wouldn't be worried about the hourly rate, and that the work I would make would be important enough and last long enough that it would far exceed any hourly rate I could get up front, right? And I just remember thinking, this guy's nuts. I'm going to work for free for how long in hopes that I get paid when? But we started to do custom scores for trailers. That was The Matrix and Potter, and this thing called Troy with Brad Pitt was like an early one. And we worked for about a year and a half, I want to say, on maybe a dozen different campaigns. And we had 3 CDs worth of music. I want to say it was like 30 or 40 tracks. And hey, let's put these on a CD and let's retain an individual whose job it will be is to try to make the connections to get other people to license these tracks. And I know this all seems like, yeah, licensing, duh, basic. But this was, early 2000s, and it wasn't a thing, right? It was a very niche thing. It had a real, like I said, bag of kind of negative connotation that went along with it. And so we really were at an opportunity to make high quality music, make decent money per drop on that music, and build a foundation of a catalog by scoring trailers, but scoring those trailers under a deal that said, if you don't use it, Warner Brothers or Disney or whoever, we get it back. And so it was actually all the leftovers that went to make the first Brand X catalogs. It was a, side effect. And at the same time, we were composing our own film scores, and we were working for a guy named John Debney doing programming for kind of his kid stuff, his Spy Kids and Cats and Dogs and these kind of pictures. And one thing led to another, and a contractor introduced us to John Williams, and we worked on Geisha and Munich with him, and then that led to Hans Calling. Anyway, we would take a month and we would write a Brand X collection or work on a big trailer campaign, and then we would go do a Hans project for 3 months. And so Brand X was this thing that was kind of running in the background that we'd refresh whenever we would have time, but it wasn't the primary focus. And kind of three things happened. One, you get real burned out doing film score, by yourself for Hans, however you're doing it. It's a lot of pressure. The time frames are long, and you go from being overemployed to being unemployed. Like that's the cycle. I have way too much to do. I'm never going to sleep again. Oh crap, I delivered. Now what's next? The phone's not ringing. Uh-oh. And in the meantime, the library thing, we kept getting licenses and there was checks coming in. They weren't huge, but they were enough to make a difference. And we just thought, hey, rather than compete with all of these incredible composers down at Remote that are, all in. I never lived in Santa Monica. I was always a suburb drive-in guy. So, I don't live there. My life isn't there. These aren't my friends. That's not really my social thing. And I saw that if you wanted to kind of follow that path, it was all in. There wasn't a lot of balance in life. Um, and then the reliability of if you've got a good body of work and a good group of people handling that body of work, it can be a consistent drip, right? It's the bucket that fills up one drip at a time. It's not a flood. It's not a deluge. Didn't get rich quick. There's a BMI check on my wall. It's for $1,200. That was the very first one. And, you know, at 33 years or whatever in it now, it the bucket did get full, but it took a long time. So all of that to say it was part accident, it was part right place at the right time, and it was part a desire to write the music once, have the sausage be made, and then also to have a quality of life where I could really focus on library music, but then I made my own schedule. And if I wanted to work all day Sunday, but I wanted to have Friday night off, completely my choice, right? Um, and so I think that was what led me into library music, and then it becoming viable enough that it's like John and I couldn't keep up with it. So then you want to go, okay, we're really good at trailer music that sounds like, you know, what we sounded like back. We don't have any hip hop, or we don't have any mariachi, or we don't have any dramatic underscore, or there's no tension track. This was all of these sort of genres that we are so comfortable with today weren't really a thing. And you had either a show that was using library music because they had no money. You had a show that had some kind of a budget for a composer, and so they would want like a main theme, an end roll, and then a bunch of bumpers, and it would be 30 grand, and you would make the music package. And then they'd still go to APM and license the mariachi and the whatevers. And then I think it was Fear Factor. I don't want to misspeak, but historically speaking, that was the first show I heard about that they said, hey, we've got this primetime show. It's kind of unscripted, and they're looking for music. And they don't have any budget, but this music supervisor is handling it. And the deal is if you want your cues on this TV show, have it in this folder or send them a CD or whatever it was by Monday morning. And if your show gets on the air, there won't be any sync and there won't be any licensing, but we'll fill out the cue sheets, and 18 months from now, you're going to get primetime NBC money. And half the established composers went, that's nuts, you're going to ruin the industry. And the other people went, this is the chance I've been waiting for. And so I think that was the big shift that the industry said, we want an infinite number of choices and we don't want to commit any money for those choices. And we want to listen to them all. Then we want to choose the 10 we like. And then we want to build a relationship with whoever made those 10 so that next time we can only have to listen to the 10 we like and not the 3,000 we're not going to use. And so we kind of shifted Brand X away from the theatrical advertising, tried to spread out. And then we went and got international sub-publishers. That was another huge thing that we went to, is we know how to license music in LA for movies. We don't know anything about licensing music for television in Berlin. So we met Sonatone, who was a big sub-publisher over in Germany, and partnered with some of them back when they were sort of suffering a similar growing pain, which was they had access to a lot of mediocre music, but the thought that they could get like the same stuff that's used to advertise Pirates or Harry Potter in the US could also be on your TV show in the UK. That had cachet to them. And so, so much of what we were able to do was simply the time and the place we were in doing it. And so the sync that you and your subscribers kind of understand today is really the outgrowth of that organism living in a petri dish and then having all these creative people, some a lot for good, right? Like the power to the people movement. You don't have to have a big expensive studio and you don't have to have $300,000 of Disney money to make viable product. You can do it with quality sample libraries, ingenuity, and creativity, right? And that was the record business as well as the film score business, right? That was all changing. And then LimeWire and Napster and streaming, and you don't sell records, you sell them for $1.29, right? Now, so think about that. Selling a record at a record store to $1.29 on iTunes to Spotify not paying licenses. And so the business has really, really come of age. It's changed so much. And now there's such help in these communities. I mean, exactly what you're doing here. When we tried to figure this out, there wasn't resources. You know, you maybe got lucky and somebody that was doing it would corner you at a NAMM show and go, let me tell you something, kid. And a lot of the time what they would tell you is don't do it. It'll eat your life. You're going to hate it. You know, quit now while you can. And, you know, you'd listen to that and it would scare you, but then you'd go, so how much of that is he or she doesn't want me to take their gig? How much of it is they're in the middle of the worst movie of their life? And they would say, and how much of that is just, yeah, you're going to have to work hard if you want to be successful, you know? And so, you know, now we have about 15,000 tracks, I want to say. We've got several lines of the company. We run an artist catalog, we have sound design, we have theatrical stuff, and we have underscore stuff. And we had grown as large as 11 people, and we're running about 6 full-time employees now. We have 3 of those are in-house composers, and then we have maybe 10 regular collaborators, I call them, people that aren't retained by us exclusively, but generally answer the phone when we call and generally will make time for us because we've shown them a decent enough result that they would like to do that. So that's kind of how we got started. And for me, it was, I wasn't going to be a sight reader. I wasn't going to be a session musician. I was burned out playing live music for drunk frat girls, the sorority girls, you know, doing that cover band thing. And I had 2 little kids. And so it was I need to make a living. I need something that's reliable, but I also would like to coach Little League on Thursday afternoon. So I think all of those things, you know, made music, library music and sync and that kind of thing so attractive for me. And, you know, it's been a really, really great thing that I've been involved in. And I'm just so thankful for it, you know.
Beautiful, man. And it's so interesting that we have a very mirrored experience getting into the industry, both certainly myself in a band, trying to do studio gigs, burning out, losing sleep, making no money, going, there's got to be a better way to do this than what I'm doing rather than just chasing coattails. That's kind of like I felt that I was doing. I got to chase somebody else's successful career and tag along with them and then I'll rise
I saw him do something cool. Maybe I can do that too, you know? Yeah.
That too, yeah. But
Yeah.
you were obviously way before me, and it's so cool to hear this story because it definitely it gives me some great insight, which is so amazing. Like now I'm 16 years in the business, but just to know that's kind of the birth of how my side of the industry is sort of like what I was exposed to when I got started in 2008 came from those experiences you were having, you know, 5-10 years before me. So that's so cool, like to just see this industry evolve from music, bottom of the barrel, you wouldn't want to mess with it, to I mean, some of my favorite music is production music these days. Some of my most famous, my most favorite artists and bands and musicians that I get inspired by come from production music, which, yeah, 25 years ago, that probably wasn't too often. So let's dive into what's going on right now. I know that obviously, you know, some things never change, some things always change. So as you're looking for, you know, this is 2024, we're going to be moving into 2025. Are there any particular trends, interesting trends you're noticing? Are you finding that more and more clients do want the artist take with your music? They do want the vocals, they do want the full song with lyrics, particular styles of music that you're finding more in demand? Anything that you can help us get a finger on the pulse of what's really happening out there, that'd be really cool for us.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously, one a-hole with an opinion. So we always start there, right? You know, I think everybody's perspective is unique and it's all based upon what you've seen and heard before. So I think, first of all, the more platforms like this you can listen to and expose yourself to, the more experiences you're going to learn from. And then that's if I observed 7 things and there was a commonality inside the 7, those were the 4 things I tried to pay attention to, was the things, the things that are different, that are unique, that are part of somebody's talent or part of their path. That's not as interesting to me, although it makes for good drinking stories and an excellent hang, as far as like, how do I apply what this person is struggling with so that I don't make those same mistakes? It's kind of like being a parent. I don't want to tell my kids exactly what to do because they're not me. But by the same token, if I can avoid them falling into some of the traps that I fell into by the insight, then, they have to listen to that wisdom, but I can at least provide it. So I think that one of the things that's happened is that there are a lot of places that people share information. I think that you have to be really careful when you listen to that information, and you have to qualify who's giving that information, where they come from, and what their experience level is. I think one of the biggest traps that I see right now is that people have heard sync music is an easy way into making money with music, right? It's way easier than getting signed as a band. It's way easier than becoming a first call film composer. All you need to do is write a banging track and then get an email from a music soup and you're off and running. So I think while that may have been true, and I'm sure that there are a dozen instances you can cite that are still that's true, I think that's one thing that people need to be aware of. It's super saturated. There is a ton of people trying to do it. It's got a bit of a reputation, it being, I can write music and get money for them to place it with audio. I mean, that's synchronization. That's literally what it means, right? The term. You will synchronize it with picture or an advertisement or whatever. And then for that synchronization, I will receive a fee. And then if it plays in a place that generates a royalty down the road, I will share in that royalty with my publisher or whatever the deal is. And so as long as you approach it that there isn't a silver bullet, like it's a long game. I mean, you've been doing it since '08, you said, right? And I'm always tickled for people that go, I got my first Marvel placement. Oh, yes, I've been waiting for this my whole career. Amazing, right? No one can ever take that away from you. When you walk into a room and you hear your stuff coming out of the speakers on the TV, you want to yell to everybody who's in ears, that's me. And what you realize is no one cares and you look like an idiot. But
And they can't probably hear it most of the time.
because there's dialogue and what, oh, wait, what? There was music there? Oh, but I think that excitement goes away really quickly when the space between the first one and the second one is 6 months. And I think that that's the best advice I could give is, don't expect it to happen quickly. And then when it does begin to happen, don't expect it to get to the volume you're going to need it to be at to survive on it. It's going to take a long time unless you get really lucky. And there are people who get lucky or have opportunities presented to them that allow them to do hey, I got a guy that's cutting a show and he fell in love with these 12 cues and he put all 12 of those cues all over 3 seasons of this thing and now it got picked up. Great. We love those stories, but that's not the way that it normally happens. So I think partnering with either publishers or labels or producers or music supervisors or other composers, those partnerships are going to still be key. So I think that's a big thing. Some of the best tracks I've ever made have been in collaboration with other people that did something that I wasn't as good at, right? Whether, drums and sound design, I can do it. I don't wake up thinking about it, right? Randon Purcell, who works with me and for us, he eats, sleeps, and drinks that. And so partnering with him to collaborate on tracks makes both of our stuff better because I like the orchestra and I'm good at the programming of the fake MIDI and he makes my stuff sound cool. And then, so I think that's the other thing is that the availability of talented people that are open to collaboration is huge. And the way that we can do it on Zoom or listen to, I don't know if that's something, Audio Movers, It's a little plug-in. You put it on your mix bus, and the guy can hear full bandwidth through his web browser. These tools that allow us to collaborate are super exciting. And so I would say that, you know, it's not coattails. It's not what you said before, right? This is absolutely, I respect what that person is up to. I think I can bring something to the table, and together we're better than apart.
Absolutely. And so, I'm really glad you said that too, because I do also get extremely annoyed when I do see a lot of people um, talking and hyping up sync as if it is this sort of like, dream come true, get rich quick, easy, anybody can do it, that kind of thing. I see that online, and it does bother me because the reality is that it's work, and it's patience and it's persistence, and it's a lot of getting rejected and getting said no to. So I'm really glad that you're, obviously sharing that real perspective, because I think a lot of people on our channel do appreciate that honesty that you don't always get from people that do talk about it. So that's really cool. It kind of sounds like to me that you're sort of saying, because, we want to make sure that, time is limited. We only have a couple of hours throughout the week to compose music. And maybe I could just say if you agree or disagree with this. So it sounds like to me you're saying, rather than focusing so much on the trends or what's being in demand, to really kind of focus on you, kind of focus on what you do well. Obviously, if you feel like you can be better by collaborating, do that. But I guess maybe I'm looking for, are there any tips or guidance you can give to an aspiring composer or producer to make sure that the precious time they have in their studio is not going to be wasted? It's going to potentially impress somebody's ears, get your attention, and potentially go, hey, you know what? I think we could get this placed. So any tips you can give us, that would be really helpful.
It's a great question. And I think, whether you've been doing it for a week or 20 years, when I come in here and the page is blank, those are the same questions, right? Am I going to listen to another trailer that's going to lead me to get inspired to write? Am I going to buy a new string library and I'm going to push down middle C and it's going to do something that's going to take me somewhere? Where does the inspiration come from? How do you maximize the time you have to create, especially when you're trying to balance it with other things? I think not the best thing, but yes, what you said, be yourself. Like when I'm dealing with a new composer, one of the things I ask right off the bat is, if all your bills were paid, like if this was just art, right? If we take it back to pure, what would you be doing? What would you write if nobody put a gun to your head and where's your happy place? Let's start there. Now, I may need you to do 5 different things than your happy place, because you may only be happy doing screamo death metal, and we don't sync a lot of that. But I think you're already in trouble if you're coming at it with the attitude of just tell me what you need, I can do anything, right? It's condescending to say jack of all, master of none, and yet there's so much truth to that, because as a library owner, we get sometimes 30, 40 submissions a week. And you can hear right away, first of all, somebody that didn't research your company, right? So if you're going to submit, make sure you're sending something that's relevant to who you're sending it to. Otherwise, it's spam. And so our people, if they listen to your music and they read your email and it's obviously just a form thing and you're just blasting, and the tracks are a style of music that we don't have, or that's not, I think that's a big thing. Know your audience. It was funny. I had a meeting with a music soup the other day, and he was talking about trailerizing songs. And the advice was the same, which is, if you're going to trailerize a song, assume that everybody else has already done it. Like, oh, I thought of a song that no one's done. Probably somebody did it already. Secondly, hey, I got this crazy idea for this song. Okay, but is anybody ever going to use it, or is it just crazy? And so always think of the destination. Why are you creating it, and where can you imagine it being used? And I think that that's one of the things that I miss most of all when I hear inexperienced, we'll call them, or underbaked demos, right? Yeah, that's cool. I'm impressed with your chops, with your guitar playing, with your lyrics, whatever it would be, but I don't see the purpose of this track, right? What would this be used for? And just like a music supervisor, when they get a new album, and this was really hard for me to learn, but guys, that thing that you spent 6 months on, they're going to digest it in about 25 seconds. and they're going to look at your sound file and they're going to look at the fat parts. And the first thing is if it's a 2x4, they're not going to listen to it. They're going to hit play and they're going to go, well, that never changes. So it's the same at the beginning as it is at the end, and it's not the track I want. 2, lots of fat parts. Cool. I'm going to go fat part, fat part, fat part. What is each one of those sections doing? What does it change? Is it in the same key at the end as it was in the beginning? Or am I going to have trouble if I try to go and now the song doesn't pay me off because they modulate? All of these sort of, you have to have a really good idea about what you're trying to do when you set out to execute it. And I would say sending me a demo with 5 things on it that all kick my butt versus 30 tracks from 7 different companies and 4 fragments of film score, I'm never going to get that far, right? And I'm already going to have my mind made up about what you're about, probably by the 5th or the 6th track. So make sure that the first 5 or 6 are really who you are and what you do. Now, as far as trends, I think, and please add your experience to this too. We hear 2 things all the time as composers. I want something new that I haven't heard before, that's fresh, that will reflect pop music. For a while it was, I want 808s. These people have no idea what an 808 is. They just know it as a buzzword. So your family adventure needs to have 808s in it because somebody told me 808s are cool. Got to be careful with all of that stuff, because who you're taking direction from, yes, they are the person that's going to decide whether you get passed up the food chain or not, but also you may think you know what they're saying and then you try to apply it, and they were making a reference in passing that had very little to do with the reality that now you've manifested, right? So, I mean, how do you deal with that when you're trying to not chase a trend, but embrace something that is current, continue to make it be true to who you are as an artist, but then also not look like, wow, you did a bunch of ridiculous things that don't work well together, but you sure got that 808 in there, so good for you, but no one's going to use it. Like, how do you blend all that stuff?
A great question. And so I think what you said is about not necessarily chasing the trend, but incorporating the modern sounds and approaches with your current personality. So I've noticed, so some of my favorite artists throughout time, I mean, the Beatles is the obvious choice, is what is the sound of the Beatles? Well, it's hard to describe it. When you hear it, you do hear it. But if you go to the 60s up till the 70s and all their different, they change their direction and their style and their structure and how long their tracks are and what they did, what instruments they used. I mean, these guys were just on the moon, probably figuratively and literally. And so they just went all over the place. So they were essentially, I see, like, if you really are an artist, you really have something to say. It doesn't really matter what form you're using. That's just my point of view. You can make a beautiful song with a MIDI keyboard. You can make a beautiful song with a guitar. You can make it with 808s. It doesn't really matter. These are just all different crayons, right? They're all different modes of expression, but it's more about how can you use these new accessible sounds, let's call it that. It's the sound of the day, the trend of the day, but then inject yourself into it. So that would be my response to that. How about you?
I think that's right, because your personality has to show through, I think more when you're a film composer, because it's funny. I was watching a little thing with Elfman the other day, and he said his favorite thing is when someone sees his name come up in the credits at the end and goes, "Oh, I never would have thought that was Danny." And so he's been true to himself. He's executed the gig, and yet he's done it in a way that didn't pigeonhole him as, oh, it's the Edward Scissorhands guy again, right? And so I think for me, that's what I'm always chasing, I love doing family adventure. And so in one side of my brain, I've got the 3 family adventure tracks that I've written that have done well, right? Then over here, I've got John Powell, How to Train Your Dragon. And every time I listen to that, I go, why do I even try? Who am I kidding? That's the real thing. And I'm this schmuck amateur. And so I think that we chase the things that inspired us. I mean, John Williams, the interviewer asked him, so, like, are you ever proud of anything you've done? And his answer was, I don't think I can afford that luxury because Beethoven exists. How can I be proud of anything because Mozart is out there in the world? So, I think we have to have that humility that, do I expect to come in here and change music? No. Do I come in here and expect to entertain myself and hopefully make something that I'm proud of that maybe someone else will embrace? Yeah. And so that's where I try to gird it, and whether you're reading Rick Rubin's book or whoever, you know, if you make it for yourself, uh, other people are going to see what you're trying to do. And then the people that like what you do are like-minded to begin with. You're not convincing them of anything, right? And so we are always balancing salesmanship, right? You have to sell yourself. You have to sell your music. You have to have people want to listen, but you also have to engage them with authenticity. And so that's me. I'm just always trying to learn something I didn't know, whether it's a new plugin, I bought Dehumanizer because somebody said it's cool to make monster voices. Okay. Now you have to go watch 10,000 videos, or I have a modular synth here, right? I've yet to do, like, I watched Junkie XL use all of those modular synths, and allegedly some percentage of it makes it into Furiosa. But just the raw time to sit and experiment with this, to try to find something that then I can bring back that will be relevant to someone, just the joy of that experimentation. You never want to lose it, but there's rarely time for it. It's a luxury, right? And especially if you're talking about, I've got a wife, kids, and a day job, and I've got 3 days a week to compose. So, that would be the other thing as far as like, what are the trends and what do we listen for and what do I see catching? It's always that blend of, it's enough of what came before that it's not scary and unfamiliar, and yet there's a signature twist to it that makes me remember it somehow, that sets it apart from something else. And we've learned signature. Oh, that just means a synth that goes. Well, no, signature can be a lot of stuff. It can be a tune, it can be a drum beat, it can be a sound. It's just something that speaks, this is authentic. And new, I don't know about new, right? There's only 12 notes, and if somebody hasn't done it with those 12 yet, mathematically I suppose they're still new. But new can be old. I mean, right? It's like, wow, that's so fresh, but it sounds like the Beatles. So it's not, when Bruno Mars comes on and it sounds like the greatest Sting song, but it's Bruno Mars, right? That's new, but it wouldn't exist without the other thing, and yet he's made it his own. And furthermore, I can't stop thinking about it and then listening to it. So I think that's our goal in all of this, is to find the trend, embrace the trend, put the trend into what you're doing, and then partner with people that will understand what you're up to and then try to advocate for you, and not constantly come to you and go, if you were just cool like Ninja Tracks, because those are the worst notes ever. Your kick drum doesn't sound as cool as Trent Reznor. I mean, yes, but also not helpful.
Right. Great.
So, and then as a we've all talked about the Moody cover, right? Just talking about trends and what's hot and what I hear people asking for. I'm in a difficult position currently because I've spent my career building library music based upon original material, fundamentally instrumental. And we're in a paradigm, I want this Nirvana song, but I want it done with a single piano and a moody female vocal. That's not new. That's been around as long as Duduk and Gladiator, right? But the push now for, I want to launch my big intellectual property by tying that intellectual property with another intellectual property that people already give the benefit of the doubt to. It's a shortcut, guys. You're trying to piggyback on someone else's popularity, and you're trying to make your chocolate bar cooler because it has a Beatles song. And I understand it and I embrace it, and we certainly have to do business in that paradigm. But I personally, if it ever ends, which I'm not sure that it will, that one has me stumped. Because we spent a lot of time, originally it was, songs, and that's where our artists came from. We're hearing a lot of sync that are songs, but they're not pop songs. Who are these people? What are these songs? Is it a label? Like when we did this IMAX movie for Michael Jordan, and I remember there were 3 or 4 really popular songs on the soundtrack. There was Underscore. We wrote that with Debney. But there were all these songs, and we had a cue, and it was going to be a solo piano thing, and I recorded it and wrote it and whatever. And when it came time to release the movie, we found out that that cue had been bounced and it had been replaced with a song that no one had heard of, and no one could understand why they would take out this perfectly good piece of appropriate underscore and replace it with a rather inappropriate song. And it turns out it was because the label had said, if you want those 3 popular songs from our mainline artists, you also will need to include on the soundtrack these 4 songs from artists that we're trying to get some momentum behind. And so already there was creative compromises being made for the sake of business. Now, this is a business, so we understand that you got shareholders, you got to do this stuff. But that was my first sort of enlightened moment of going, so there are agendas at play that sometimes transcend the obvious agenda. And so when we start talking about sync music, and all of us who said, hey, I can make a catalog of 5,000 instrumental tracks in 40 different genres, and I can partner with 3 different labels, and as long as I'm in reality television and promo and overseas, that's going to look like making a living. I think right now we're in a paradigm where that's beginning to be challenged because there's so much music that doesn't conform to that being used. And it's interesting. A few years ago, I'm talking a lot, so interrupt me if you need me to take a breath.
No, this is all great. We love it.
We went to the PMC, and I remember the big revelation at the PMC was, if you look globally at the amount of money pop music, commercial music, they called it, is making, and then you compare that to the amount of global money production music is making, production music is taking a huge chunk out of commercial music when it comes to these applications, right? In program, movies, soundtrack, blah, blah, blah. And I think we all sat in the room and went, hell yes, now's our time. And instead, what's kind of happened is the labels have all gone, oh crap, we're losing. We have attrition going on. We need to reclaim some of that. Those are real streams of revenue. And furthermore, if my tired 70s rock track gets synced to a really popular gameplay trailer for the new Overwatch level, I'm going to see music sales of my tired ass artist that I haven't seen in 20 years. Yes, I would like that, please. We've seen it. One of our most popular tracks of all time, as far as Spotify is concerned, is a track called Viper. It's not it's a great track. Darius Moldovan wrote it, but it's mostly sound design, drums, angry percussion. But it was featured on a huge, huge video game trailer. And it continues to be a massively popular track for us, even though I would say, hey, well, we write neoclassical and we write family adventure and all this stuff with great melodies, and listen to my John Williams orchestration, and we recorded that in London with a real band. And none of that matters anymore, right? And so I think, when we're struggling going, so what the hell should I do next? It's all so confusing. I don't know. And that's kind of where I become an observer as a guy who's maybe not unique, but I'm the composer, but I'm also the library owner. So I'm also the publisher. And so when I fail, I don't only fail the company, and I don't only fail on the publishing side, but then I also fail personally, because it's not just the money that I make being Brand X, the publisher. It's very much the money that I make being Tom Gire, the composer. Because let me tell you, those evil publishers that take half of everything, they spend it all to try to get the opportunity to make more. And so that's what I realized right away was like, oh no, my personal BMI is still very important, no matter how far up the sort of sync ladder I climb as an owner of others' intellectual properties. So I'm fighting the fight. If Tom Gire, the composer, is screwed by this, Brand X is certainly going to be impacted by it, but also all of the composers that I rely on for Brand X are going to be impacted. Blankets is another one that we come across, right? Composers used to give their tracks to a library because they thought they were going to get a share of a $20,000 trailer sync. It was totally worth it. Now, if you give your track to a library and fundamentally they're in a bunch of blankets and needle drops, and it's not 20 grand, it's $300 and hopefully some back end in 2 years, now your motivation to work with that library changes. They're no longer the library that you want to partner with to try to catch the whales. They're the library you want to partner with because they catch a whole bunch of tiny fish in a great big net. You need both. And so I think that the trend right now is to try to find where I fit in the trailerization of commercial music, and how can I as an artist make any money on that? Because let's face it, that's a one and done. You make a new master, the label owns the new master because you use the original vocal. Not the same as a cover, where I own the new master and all I have to do is cut a deal with the original writer and the publishing. And even better, that artist is dead and somebody owns the estate. Now I'm only dealing with one entity, and anything I make is a derivative and we all get paid. So I think one of the challenges is, how does the business work for guys like you and me who depend on, back to what we talked about in the beginning, write it once, get paid many times. If you're doing arranging work on someone else's intellectual property, your ability to do that comes into question. So I think one of the trends we see is one that we all need to be aware of. We want to participate in it, but I don't know what it means for the rest of the things that we're trying to do, if that makes sense too.
Definitely does. And for sure, it's mirrored my, expectations and my just noticing how this industry has evolved in my 16 years is starting off with definitely saw a lot bigger sync fees, a lot bigger opportunities. And I've definitely seen those dwindle and dwindle. But at the same time, also have seen, many more opportunities to get new placements. So all the cable companies, streaming networks now, just new places. And I am definitely very bullish. I know I've been bullish for many years, but I'm hoping that VR and some of these platforms, these new places to be entertained, do start to take off a little bit more, and we start to see even new marketplaces just develop and grow, and also need high quality music to include in these experiences, games, movies, whatever they're going to be in these VR platforms as well. So I've definitely seen that trajectory where, yes, the good old days, so to speak, of those like 50,000, 100,000, like huge sync fees, not as often, not coming through as often, but definitely seeing the quantity, the different places that you can get those placements exponentially growing, which is also, kind of our only saving grace at this point. So definitely have seen it. I think that's really interesting that we both kind of witnessed both of those. I want to basically just wrap this one up with we don't have to go into an extremely in-depth conversation about it, but I'm obviously plugged into the AI news. I know that you've been following it as well. From going back to 2023, when I was first aware of Google's Music LM, I thought, oh my gosh, this could be the industry killer that could completely take all of our work away, not just us lowly production music library composers, but big film composers and very, very well-established people that are very expensive to, compose and make music for films and TV shows. So obviously the threat is there. I think we all can see the potential threat there, but there's also been a lot of applications for it to be helpful and useful for us human beings, composers, library owners, to allow, clients to find music more quickly, to allow us to create metadata more automatically, to create stems and others. A lot of the boring work we necessarily don't really want to do. We can use these tools also aid us and help us become more profitable and more productive in our industry. So let's go to your point of view on AI music, generative music generally. Where are the potential threats for you? How do you feel about it? Do you have any optimism for the future with this technology? Just where are you sitting with this right now?
It's certainly the hot topic. I think the big existential threat, if you were to call it that, is people are lazy and people are cheap. It's an unfortunate fact of human nature. And so I think if you are at the lowest common denominator of any of these conversations, you are in the most peril. That's what I'd start off by saying. The intellectual protections notwithstanding, like let's take the how did it learn, who's it ripping off, and how can you protect what it creates and call it your own if all you've done is make the prompt, right? So let's put that over here for a second, and let's just talk about what it could actually be conceived of stealing from us in the short and long term. As far as I can tell, and I haven't played with it as much in music as I have in artwork, funny enough. One of the big struggles owning a music library is the stinking cover art, because it can either be really cheap and really bad, or it can be really convoluted and really expensive. And so, I have embraced it as a way when we're talking about imagine an alien planet, and there's like light filtering down, and there's a little dude, and he sees off in the distance a thing, but the brand X logo should be bursting from the stone with you have these conversations with an art person, and $6,000 later they give you something that has nothing to do with what you meant. And so for us to be able to do that guessing game with AI, then provide the fruits of the guessing game to the artwork person to say, okay, here's what I meant when I said, now actually make that your own, right? It's been so helpful. Oh my gosh, now, does the art guy that's going to make $2,000 instead of $8,000, how does he feel about it? I don't know. That's something he's used to, the revisions in the process that ends up a cover equals this much money. It's kind of what you and I were saying, where the sync fee used to be this and now it's this. So if I'm still running my business in a way that only works if I'm getting a $50,000 sync fee, and I won't adjust it because I realize the average sync fee is $1,200 and I need 30 of them, you're kind of signing your own death warrant at that point. So as far as music goes for AI, if it exists into my DAW that I can say, hey, I want a kick drum that sounds somewhere in between this kick drum and that, and have pop references. Or I was watching a guy make a VST for a green Ibanez tube screamer, and he basically used ChatGPT to kind of do it, and then he uses a different thing, and then somebody had to compile it into the shell. The thought that you could become a coder and then use the code that you had this thing do, and you could use it inside of your creativity, amazing. The fact that I can have it read my resume and check my grammar. We've had spell checks and grammar checks forever, but the amount of contextual reading that it does now is unbelievable. But I think the other thing we have to understand is, a friend of mine said this several years ago, talking about AI understands what triggers the human, right? Why can AI write beautiful poetry that makes you tear up? Because it understands when you talk about a man and a wife, and the wife is sick with cancer and it's their last sunset together, that triggers human. And so it's real smart at using, and if it tries to trigger the human, then it doesn't get the response it wants, it changes the approach. And it can do that so quickly that it can take what would take, if we're writing a cue and we're playing it for a director, that process of revisions to get to the director's vision so that the cue is doing what they wish, this takes days, weeks. And I don't know that just because the computer can kick out 30 versions that the director is going to have any better ability to work through those. It's not going to get us any place faster. So I don't think it's going to like steal the work because the lazy human that doesn't want to pay for the expensive composer isn't going to be happy with what AI does, at least for now. Secondly, it doesn't take notes worth of crap. You can say, I like the melody, but I don't like the beat, and change the lyric it just writes a brand new thing every time. So I think it's limitations from when I tell you that music needs to be more yellow, or I ask you what a banana tastes like. These are things that as two human beings sharing an experience, we can unpack banana doesn't taste like an orange. And it's kind of, we start talking about, well, it's creamy and it's this and that. Well, that's not a flavor. That's a sensation. And so I think that AI is so all encompassing that as long as we continue to create with human connection involved in it, and the refinement process requires those connections, we're going to be good. And if we're making free beats for Audio Jungle, I think you're in trouble, because I think that's the stuff that the computer is going to go right after. It's already doing it. There's a guy, he plays drums along. He says, okay, today we're going to have Suno write me a country song about drinking too much Mountain Dew in church. And it's hilarious. And it does it in 3 seconds. So, does Weird Al have a future in this kind of world? I don't know about any of that stuff, but I think, creativity at a human level, and then the connection with the people that we are making the art with and for. I think that's going to be our saving grace. Then the other one is that no sane business person is going to invest in something that they can't protect. And so just as if you make a piece of art using Midjourney, the universe owns it because the universe created it and you're just the caretaker. So you can use it, but you can't call it yours. And until they get around that, I don't think there's much threat because you can't copyright something that AI made. And you're not going to put $300,000 into a pirate's film score if Disney can't own it and exploit it. So until that all shifts, and so then what happens? The training set has to be. So it's only been trained on music we own, and we have relationships with the artists that it has trained on. Oh, well, that's why it sounds like shit because it never heard the Beatles. So how good could it be if it doesn't understand the Beatles? Okay. So I think just limiting the training set to things that you can pay a royalty on isn't going to get it because now we're in a weird way asking the AI to compete unfairly with us because I don't know about you. Every piano solo I've ever played is a little bit of McCoy Tyner and a little bit of Chick Corea and a dash of Oscar Peterson. And hopefully, if I'm lucky, 3% Tom Gire. And probably the 3% Tom is just how I've chosen, you know, what's on a Neapolitan pizza? It's pizza crust, it's tomatoes, it's mozzarella. But the skill of the person putting those 6 ingredients is what makes the pizza good or bad. So I don't think the ingredients are going to change much. I just think it's the way that we continue to be creative working with those ingredients. And I don't know that AI, given the same ingredients, can have the same experience. So for now, I think we're good. But I think we got to be real careful with it, you know, because the motivations of you and I, were we to run the world, would be completely different than the motivations of someone who just wants to exploit it for monetary gain and they're not worried about the ethics. So, you know, I've heard you talk about this, you know, who's in charge of it? That's the bigger concern to me than it itself is who's running it, who's training it, and what are they trying to do with it?
Absolutely. Yeah, the technology is always neutral. It's always how it's implemented, how it's used. And of course, this is kind of this new paradigm where we've had technological revolutions that threaten all of our lives and all of our jobs, right? Maybe not hopefully lives, but our jobs. But this is this big, massive one that it's like it requires the intellectual property and the hard work of humanity for it to be worth anything, right? Because
Yes.
ChatGPT isn't popping out anything unless it's read every bit of text that's ever been on the internet, right? And so its data set is so valuable, it's so important, it's so like reliant on that information and that human creativity. And so, which is different than most other technology, like the internet wasn't being built upon other people's intellectual property. It was a brand new technology that was still revolutionizing the world, but we didn't get the sense of like, man, it's just kind of taking its big vacuum and sucking up all this great high quality content and not asking for permission to do that or compensation.
And it's parroting. It's just like making bad
Right.
copies of it that are getting like a photocopy. The resolution is reducing every time you water it down again, you know?
Yep. So it's definitely a new paradigm we're in, but I do share your optimism there, and I do share your also realism about it. Definitely, it's threatening those sort of at the sea level or below, where you're providing music that it itself could sound like it was generated by AI. It's basically more loop based production, not really giving a lot of your own original high quality content into it. I think you're right. That's definitely first on the chopping block and easily to be replaced by AI generators. So thank you so much, Tom, man. I really appreciate your time. I learned a lot. I definitely got a great insight into a little bit more of the history of our industry. So that was really great. And I would love to have you back on. If you guys are watching this and you guys have further questions for Tom about anything we talked about today, please leave that below. We'll be sure to make sure, I don't know if Tom wants to come back and answer them or not, but we'll definitely get your questions on there. And I'd love to have you back on, man. It's just so good to talk shop and to, find common ground with people that are also are advocates. That's definitely what I wanted to, thank you for as well. Is that even though I don't work with, Brand X, I do always want to thank those of you that are, are advocates in this industry, basically taking music from composers and producers, representing it, pitching it, getting out their place, because it's a lot of work. I know from all the library, owners and representatives that I've gotten to know, you guys you have two jobs. You're full-time managing your film and clients, your film and TV clients, and you're managing your composers. So you basically are facing two different fronts, trying to keep both of them happy, trying to answer all their questions. It's just a lot. And it's one of the main reasons why I never became a library owner, because I just think I can do what you can do, man. So thank you for all the hard work you're doing on behalf of your composers and from all of us, man. Appreciate it.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks back. I mean, the ability to come here, share this kind of knowledge, but also we wouldn't be here if it weren't for the composers, And the hardest thing to do is to get paid. Making the music is stuff we would all do anyway, whether it's I got to play the piano, I got to play the drums. But finding the way to turn art into commerce, that's the challenge. And I've just been super, super lucky that I've had help all along the way. And it's only because of the people that have gone before me and taken the time to share knowledge or whatever. So I'm compelled to do it. I'm a musician at heart. And, I feel for every single person out there that's got their guitar in their hand going, man, next week, if it doesn't happen, I'm sunk. Keep going. Keep going, because it is a fight. It is a battle, but it's a long-term battle. And what else are you going to do, right?
Perfect way to end it. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you soon.